I'm Rene Galvan. I'm the president and CEO of HAR. I started with HAR in 1996, and I became executive vice president in 1998. HAR is already known as the greatest association in America, and I really just want to build on the foundation that has been built. Members are the heart of the organization, and I really want to hear from you to know what's working and what isn't, so we can continue to make HAR the very best. HAR's commitment to its members will never change. Technology might change, the market will change, but we will always be here to serve you. I met my wife at the University of Texas. We are both CPAs. One of my sons is a CPA, and my other son is an engineer. I guess that makes us a numbers family. HAR is here for you. I'm excited for what's ahead, and I'm honored to serve as the president and CEO of HAR.
What's the best thing you can do when selling your home?
Make sure it's on HAR.com.
HAR.com is where other sites get their home data. So when it's listed here, it's everywhere.
Plus, on HAR.com, homebuyers get access to tools they can trust and the most up-to-date home listings online.
Don't miss out on more potential shoppers, offers, and a faster sale when selling your home.
So, ask your agent.
Is your home on HAR.com?
When it came time to buy a new home, I needed the perfect Zen.
I needed the perfect office.
The perfect schools.
The perfect deal.
Whatever your perfect is, you'll find it on HAR.com. Because HAR.com is where almost all of the homes in your area are listed for sale first, and where those other home sites get their listings from. Plus, we've got the shopping tools you can actually trust. So when you're ready to find your perfect, shop HAR.com.
Honey, is our home listed on HAR.com?
Yeah, it just went live. Why?
This is way better than my sister's place.
I know. I guess it works.
Well, HAR.com is where almost all homes are listed first and where the other websites pull their homes from.
Oh, is that quartz?
So when we list our home on HAR.com, it gets listed everywhere, which means
more potential shoppers, offers, and a faster sale.
Exactly.
It's giving home.
Hello and welcome to Member Focus Monday. I'm Christina Schaefer, Director of Social Media and Sponsorships for HAR. Before we get started with today's topic, this week's Member Focus Monday and the HAR On the Move podcast are sponsored by the Woodlands Hills and Howard Hughes communities. We'll share more about that later in the show. Today, we are talking about something realtors don't always think about until there's a problem, and that's making sure that you're properly protected from business and liability coverage to personal and life insurance. There's a lot of areas where agents may be exposed without even realizing it. Joining us today is Mark Rafail with Rafail Insurance Agency to help break down what realtors should be paying attention to, common gaps in coverage, and how to better protect your business and your future. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Hi, Christina. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for taking time to be here. This is such an important topic that I think, offline, you and I have talked a little bit about it, and I think a lot of people don't know what they don't know when it comes to this stuff. So I'm happy that you're able to join us and kind of break some of this down. Before we get into everything, though, can you share a little bit about your background and what you do?
Sure, Christina. Again, thanks for having me. Born and raised here in Houston, Texas, which I think is is awesome. I've seen Houston change. My parents migrated here from Egypt in the 80s, and I got recruited to work for an insurance agency 19 years ago. And I went broke working for this agent, but I learned a lot. And I went into oil and gas in '08 and got laid off in '09. And I had my insurance license and decided to drag in my girlfriend, now wife, into the business 17 years ago, and literally went over to HAR across the street and asked how I can support the Houston Association of Realtors. And by the grace of Jesus, we're 17 years in business. We're an independent brokerage with a staff of 8 that specialize in commercial insurance, business insurance, personal insurance, and benefits. We've been voted Houston Chronicle's best insurance agency twice, and we really take pride in who we work with, Christina.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that story. I think it's helpful for people to hear. And you mentioned independent business owners. Realtors are independent business owners. So why is it so important for them to think about insurance differently?
Sure, you're right, Christina. That real estate agent makes a living in a lot of cases, or even if it's something that they're trying to grow into making a living. A lot of times, people create their own LLCs, their own teams, and they believe that their brokerage's errors and omissions insurance and business insurance will protect that entity if sued. Well, I always urge people to check, because your brokerage's errors and omissions insurance will cover individual agents, but they're not going to cover your entity or your LLC if it's sued. Now, in Texas, I believe there's a common knowledge that your brokers can pay your LLC, but if that LLC is dragged into a lawsuit, you may want to consider having your own errors and omissions and general liability and cyber liability, things outside of E&O, in case that entity is dragged in. And I also think it's important to know that if, God forbid, you kill Timmy on a Sunday and it's just leaving the grocery store, and you find out your personal insurance maybe has state minimum liabilities, and you look at the billboards, Christina, it's a lawyer ready to sue. So if they are to sue you personally or your entity, we want to make sure that you're not carrying state minimum liability. You have at least $1 million limits to defend yourself, because otherwise, if you have to defend yourself, Christina, you're going to have to leave work, hire an attorney, and maybe the defense cost by itself can put you out of business. And if you are liable, then we could be ruining people's livelihood, and that's something we want to avoid.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. One thing that probably a lot of people haven't even thought about, and if we have time, we'll talk about it more later, but I just wanted to mention cyber. You mentioned cyber, and I think that's one area that people might want to look a little deeper into, especially with the amount, and I know our members are getting them every day, multiple times a day, scam emails and things like that are taking place. So definitely a lot they could be looking into. When you look at agents today, where do you find that they are most exposed, or maybe even just underinsured?
I would say if you're a broker or you have your own entity, oftentimes the state requires the errors and omissions insurance, which insures your contractual errors. If somebody is not happy with your work, if you flat out mess up, right? That's errors and omissions. However, what's not required, Christina? What if somebody gets hurt at an open house? What if an agent gets in a car accident and a lawyer drags in the business? And of course, what if you're hacked? So general liability is going to cover if somebody gets hurt or you damage somebody else's property, whether you're renting a space for your brokerage or you have a virtual office. People are out and about, right? So and then if you are hacked because the title company has 8 people on the email string and somebody wires a couple $100,000, what does a good lawyer do? They drag in every party. So if you don't have cyber liability, you could be defending yourself. That it costs $50,000 to say I didn't do it. But what if you are liable? Then your cyber liability will kick in. Also, Christina, I feel that there's a lot of real estate professionals that are managing properties, And if you don't disclose that, and a tenant says, hey, I'm suing because you mismanaged this property, or you kicked me out under unfair grounds, that's going to be endorsing your errors and omissions for property management. And then there's another liability. It's called employment practices liability insurance. We like acronyms in insurance. EPLI. If you're sued for like wrongful termination, harassment, discrimination, that's employment practices liability. So these optional coverages are the ones that we bring to the table on the business side. Now, personally, Christina, I feel like a lot of agents, they end up, at the end of the year getting paid as a 1099, and then they're left to figure out their own benefits. And if, God forbid, an agent gets sick, they're disabled, they pass away, then they're going to need some type of benefits package to protect their income so their family doesn't have to use their savings and be out of business, God forbid. And then lastly, a lot of times when you get paid 1099, you get stuck with a tax bill at the end and you're not saving for retirement. So I always urge agents, whether it's an individual retirement account to save on taxes today, or a life insurance policy that could be structured like a retirement account that could be taxed like a Roth IRA where withdrawals are tax-free, then having those buckets later on in life makes the agent feel like I was able to run a business and have my own benefits, versus sometimes people think they can only have one or the other. Work for corporate America, get great benefits, but gosh, you really don't love the job. And then you love your job, and then you're trying to navigate your benefits. So I think on the business end, there's gaps. On the benefits end, there's gaps. And then personal insurance. A personal umbrella policy, Christina, think of it as your lawyer. If you do get in a real accident, and a lawyer sues for $1 million because somebody's hospitalized or they pass away, or it passes $1 million because a lawyer said, gosh, they have some assets, then an umbrella gives you increments of $1 million in liability that will look over the insurance policies it knows about. Generally, it's going to be your automobile insurance, right? Personal automobile insurance, your homeowner's insurance, and then any rental properties. If you have rental properties in your personal name and somebody dies, those are the first thing a lawyer can get a hold of. So having at least $250,000 in liability on all your vehicles and at least $300,000 in liability on all your properties. If you tell your umbrella carrier about them, then your umbrella will provide increments of $1 million, whether it's 1 million or 100 million, on top. And I always suggest a $1 million umbrella, Christina, is the cheapest lawyer you can get, because let's just say on average it's $1,000 a year. What's easier to pay, right? Protecting your assets or trying to save a couple $100s. So those are the often gaps. And if God forbid you don't come home, I want to make sure that the family has life insurance to take care of their real estate, take care of their income. And so we try to be consultative, not transactional.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for going through those for us, Mark. I'm seeing some comments already coming in. Great info. Francisco said Mark is an insurance whiz. So we love that. If anyone who's tuned in for the live broadcast of this show has questions, you can type those in and we'll get to as many as we can. Of course, I've got more questions for you though, Mark, as well. Let's talk a little bit deeper about liability and day-to-day risk. What are the biggest risks realtors face in their day-to-day business?
Sure. So whether you have an entity or a brokerage or you're an individual, I would say for the brokerage or the entity, what if you get in an automobile accident and a lawyer drags in the entity, even though the car's in your personal name, right? It's not under the company name. It's not wrapped with and sometimes people do wrap their vehicle. There's a coverage called non-owned auto liability. It will cover vehicles not owned by the realtor or the broker or the entity. If the lawyer sues and they're dragged in, we're going to cover the liability under the business insurance because you can endorse that. Now, and that will defend, even if Susie, your admin, runs to the bank, gets in a car accident, and the Texas Hammer says, we're dragging in that brokerage. That person had a Remax shirt. They had somebody's team name on. They had their truck wrap, and the broker doesn't know, right? But if they get dragged in, the non-owned auto liability will cover the entity. We won't fix the car, right? Because that's going to be on the individuals. And if the broker or the real estate agent has an entity and they decide to purchase the vehicle under the company name, then they will get commercial auto insurance to defend the entity and them. Versus if you're driving around with personal insurance and the lawyer drags in and says, we're suing your entity for $1 million+, your personal insurance is going to say, I'm sorry, right? And they're going to put their hands up and say, we weren't insuring a business, So that's a really big gap that I think can be fulfilled. And then the other one is workers' compensation. How many of us have an admin person? How many of us have an assistant it's not a 1099 relationship? Because a 1099 relationship, Christina, is you come and go as you please. I don't tell you what to do, right? But if, God forbid, somebody passes away at a showing, on the way to a showing, a judge is going to make the call, and the judge is going to say, does it walk like a duck? Does it talk like a duck? It's a duck. So if you treat this 1099 person, you're like, I need you here on this date, this day, this day, and you've been paying them consistently, then workers' compensation is going to protect the company when it gets sued because that employee got hurt on the job. And by the way, workers' comp is low cost. We're talking less than $1,000 per year per $100,000 in payroll. And so just to give you a gauge, and a lot of times people want to steer away from employing people, but I really do think it's a way that your brokerage could start to offer benefits to those that are full-time. And then the ones that are not full-time, then we want to be able to provide them an avenue. So I partner with brokers to help them with that side if they need health insurance, things like that. So Christina, those are some gaps that we often see is the workers' comp, the non-owned auto liability, the general liability, and cyber liability. All things not required to do business as a real estate broker, but those are the things that could get you in trouble. And we don't want to be the bad guy and ruin a real estate agent's career.
Yeah. For an individual agent, many do carry E&O, as you mentioned. If they're looking to add on some additional protections, what should they consider first beyond that?
Yes. So there's something called a business owner's policy, a BOP, that will include generally a lot of the liabilities that errors and omissions does not cover. So on one policy, let's say, for example, you have some property, like maybe you have computers, desk, home office. Okay, it automatically includes business property. If you lease a space, hey, it can automatically include that build out for that nice office because that's not insured by any landlord. The tenant's responsible for their build out and the things inside when they lease their own space, Christina. And I always mention to people, if you lease first floor space, flooding is not covered on any insurance, whether you're a tenant or an owner. So we bring those things up because an inch of water can ruin somebody's career, if you're talking gutting it and things of that nature. So if a business owner's policy will cover any property, and then the general liability, that slip and fall, or I damaged somebody else's property because I left the door unlocked after I left, or I had a broker open house and somebody got hurt. So that's your general liability. And then of course we mentioned cyber, right? If you get hacked, real estate agent, or you get dragged in, guess what? There's something called social engineering, changing a letter or two in an email, blasting your clients. If somebody does that, does your cyber liability cover the PR exposure? Meaning, I've got to clean this up. And if this email went out to like 10,000 people, I'm technically responsible to monitor everybody's credit that was exposed during this hack. So a good cyber liability policy is covering first party and third party liability. It's covering the PR, and it's covering business interruption. what if your business can't operate because of a claim and you average X amount of commissions per month? Well, if you're out of commission for 2-3 months because of this litigation or property claim or cyber hack, we want to make sure you can stay in business, because a lot of times you still have financial responsibilities, whether it's paying a lease, paying your fees, paying your admin, right? So a business owner's policy could fill the gap on the liabilities that a real estate professional should carry.
Very good. A couple of questions came in that I wanted to address. Starting with Vivian, she said, my brokerage has me pay E&O per contract. Not sure if that's enough.
That's a great question, Vivian. As I mentioned, if your broker is covering the errors and omissions, they're going to cover liability if you mess up individually on your contract or somebody not happy with your work. Now, without knowing the brokerage's insurance portfolio or setup, if they've got the other liabilities, like I mentioned, the general, the cyber, the non-owned auto liability, and I'm a fan of the employment practices liability insurance, because you'll see it sometimes on your errors and omissions as some type of discriminatory coverage, where if somebody were to sue because they felt discriminated, those liabilities is what's going to pick up beyond the errors and omissions. So without knowing, I hope that the agent carries those or broker carries those other liabilities. But if you have your own entity, Vivian, and you're branding a team or a brand, if that entity is sued, my gut says your errors and omissions on your brokerage's side is not going to cover another business. If Vivian gets paid as a 1099 sole proprietor, you as an individual may be covered for that contractual error. But beyond that, Vivian, if you have an entity, I would encourage that entity to be covered.
Okay. Very good. Thank you for that, Mark. A few people, JC and also Alan, are asking, how much does cyber coverage cost per year?
Great question. I would say it's generally about $1,500 per year for $1 million limits when your revenues are under $500,000. As your revenues go up, it may go up because the higher the exposure, right? The more transactions, the more revenue. Generally, the higher the risk. But I would say, if your revenues are $500,000 or under, to get a good cyber liability policy with Lloyd's of London or CFC is the carriers. If you look them up, they've got their CFC is a brokerage that is based out of San Francisco, a technology insurance company that created these cyber liability policies. Or if they can be endorsed to that business owner's policy, what happens is they're going to include smaller limits like 100,000, because you didn't do an application. We just added it as an endorsement. So I think $1 million limits are the minimum somebody should have. But if you're something is better than nothing. So if you're able to package it on your insurance and add they call it a sub limit when it's under $1 million, sometimes that might be better than nothing. But the higher the revenue, the higher your limit should be.
Very good. And it kind of led in, you were talking about packaging. Stefan was asking, can many of these policies be wrapped into one payment? So is there packaging that insurance brokers can provide?
Great question. So with every risk, sometimes not every carrier is a fit for every type of liability. I'll give you an example. A lot of times the errors and omissions, if there's property management, you go through a different carrier. If there's no property management, this company wants it. If you're doing commercial or development or business brokering, sometimes people business broker real estate and the business. So each carrier might have different risks. So you might find yourself, Christina, with 3 different companies or 2 companies, or if it fits in the wheelhouse one company. But if it's 3 different companies, then generally on the errors and omissions, I tend to see that you make a down payment generally of about 30% down and then 9 installments. And then on the business owner's policies, usually that will be on a package with a carrier like Hartford or Liberty Mutual, and they'll provide 12 equal installments. And I tend to see business owners policies for under $2,000 a year to include a lot of the gap liabilities. And I tend to tell people, what's easier to pay, especially if this business provides an income and a living that you want to continue on, then I would say the business owner's policy, the cyber liability could be separate, and the E&O, it can be 3, but it can be 2. We'll go to the market when that time comes and be able to provide options to each of you when that time comes.
Very good. I know we've got some more questions and comments coming in that we're going to take a look at. But before we jump into those questions, just a quick reminder that this week's Member Focus Monday and the HAR On the Move podcast are sponsored by the Woodlands Hills and Howard Hughes communities. Let's take a quick look at what they have to offer. Thank you again to the Woodlands Hills and Howard Hughes communities for your support. You can visit thewoodlandshills.com for more information. Now, Mark, if an agent hasn't reviewed their insurance in a while, where should they start?
Well, I think it's a good idea to email us or an agent that you trust your current policies, and then explain what your operations, your lifestyle is. Then we can compare whether there's any gaps or not. I think whether you're a property owner, you're renting, business owner, I'm passionate about telling people flooding is excluded on everything. And that is a gap that I think agents have been sued for, because a lot of times they say you're not in a flood zone. Lender says you're not in a flood zone. Technically, we're all in a flood zone. We're on the Gulf Coast. We're below sea level. If you drive around, Christina, you look at all the freeways, we got 12 lanes on I-10. We got neighborhoods being built. So that means when people say I didn't flood on this hurricane and I shouldn't get it now, well, once you go back, those people that got an inch of water or a couple feet of water, they would have been very thankful had they had a flood insurance policy, because paying $1,000, $1,500 a year, even if flood rates have changed, it's a lot easier than gutting your house, staying in a hotel somewhere on your own, and having to replace all your contents. So the last thing you really want to think about is money. And if you're going to insure your biggest asset for everything except a flood in greater Houston, whether it's required or not, I say you should carry it, because 33% of floods, Christina, happen in the areas that are not required. And I've seen enough catastrophes to know it's our job to bring it up in the beginning and mention, look, even if it's not required, the low risk areas can flood, and the high risk areas, yes, I know you're required to have it, but that's a big gap, along with the umbrella insurance. Because what if you've got a nice house, nice cars, and you find out you got 30 grand in liability or 100 grand? I know you're worth more than that just based on your house, right? So when you drive around and you see those billboards of lawyers, they're coming to sue. And if somebody gets hurt, we want to make sure that the insurance is defending you. So I would say sending a copy of your current policies, and then making sure that we can cross-reference any gaps. And optional, what are the optional coverages? Because I feel like in a commoditized world, when God forbid, the lender's on a time crunch, the real estate agent's in a time crunch, the seller or buyer, they're all like, just get us the cheapest insurance, which sounds great at the time until you got to use it. So we try not to commoditize insurance and say, look, these are what's required. This is what's not required. And oftentimes the items not required are the things that tend to save people financially.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you, Mark. A question came in from Claudia. She is asking what kind of policy covers the marketing that our video marketing directors and web page developers post on our behalf? And then she had a follow-up question. She said, or what insurance should we ask if they have?
That's a great question. So having cyber liability and the employment practices liability, believe it or not, I've had people sued because their website was not ADA compliant. And what if somebody posts on social media and somebody says that's copyright infringement, right? You took my idea, and somebody sues for that. So on your business owner's policy, when you have the combination of the cyber and employment practices liability, then there's no gray area. So your E&O with your business insurance policy, business owner's policy, that includes hopefully the other liabilities, that is really what's going to protect you. So if somebody says you stole the idea from me, or somebody says, my lawyers are going out there, Christina, and actually going through people's websites and saying, if it's not ADA compliant, here's a letter. If you've got the insurance company defend you, they can help. But if not, you got to get an attorney and defend yourself, which is something we're trying to avoid.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Thank
So
you.
cyber and employment practices liability, along with your general liability, those things, depending on the scenario, will protect you.
Thank you for that. And thank you for the question, Claudia. We appreciate that. Well, Mark, we like to give people actionable steps when we can. So what is, one thing every realtor could do this year to better protect their business and their future?
I would say have a friendly review with somebody experienced that knows the intricacies of business insurance, your personal insurance, and benefits. Because if somebody knows one and not the other, and there's a gap, it's gonna affect the other. So we're happy to do a friendly review, no cost, no obligation. Send us a copy of your current policies either to my email or call our office Monday through Friday, and let us tell you. Because if you're good where you're at, here's the other thing. We might tell you that policy you have is grandfathered. You've had a great rate for 5 years on your E&O, but you're missing, cyber. Go back and ask if you add it, because maybe $1,000 is easier to pay than $1 million, right? So we can give the complimentary review, say where the gaps are, and if we can help, great. If not, we might point you back in your same direction and say just make a few tweaks that can save you.
All right. Well, great, Mark. This has been very informative. I'm sure everybody that's tuned in is appreciating it. I know I saw a few comments coming in saying that was great info. So we really appreciate you sharing your expertise with us today. Again, it's one of these topics that a lot of people put off, but having the right coverage in place can make a huge difference when the unexpected happens. So we really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Christina. I really appreciate you and HAR.
Thank you, Mark. Well, for those watching, again, we hope this is a good reminder to take a closer look at your current policies and make sure both you and your business are properly protected. One more quick thank you to the woodlandshills.com and Howard Hughes Communities for sponsoring this week's Member Focus Monday and HAR on the Move podcast. Next week, we will be joined by Chair-elect Kat Robinson. She's going to share with everyone how to get more involved with HAR. So be sure to tune in for that one. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.